So we want to review real quickly because chapter 1, we have this King Xerxes, right? And he has this big banquet. The people get drunk, and he calls in who? His wife, Vashti, the queen. And Anne was really disturbed about this when we came home, because I suggested that she might come in, either do a lewd dance or even come in naked. And he says, well, these were not very good people, as we're going to see today. And so she refused to come in, right? And so he what? Banished her. And, and that's it. I'm done with you. That's what they would do, all right? And so that's chapter 1. And then we looked at chapter 2 and started it because it said after these things. And so there's a time period. Maybe he lost the war to Greece during this time. We don't know for sure. But well, I think exactly, because it says he remembered Vashti and what she'd done and what had been decreed against her. And so that word, remember, one guy says, it indicates he's regretting his action. Like, what did I do that for? Okay. And that's what sometimes happens when we're reactive rather than thoughtful. So the attendants, I got a solution. We got to figure it out for you. Let's just get a new one. We'll have a beauty pageant. And we'll take all these virgins to bring here, and you can pick the one, and she'll be the new queen, all right? Now, that's how we get introduced to Esther, all right? So her uncle, I keep calling him that. He is her what? Cousin. Okay, we made that clear. That's Mordecai. It doesn't say it, but I just want you to know who he is. Was bringing up Hadassah. That's her Hebrew name, and then Esther, probably named after one of the Medo-Persian gods, is her Persian name. She has no father or mother. She was beautiful form and face, and her father and mother died, and he takes her as his own daughter. This lady's lived a dual life. I mean, she has a Hebrew origin with a Hebrew name, but she lives in a pagan world with a pagan name. And there's the conflict I think all of us have, because we wear the name of Christ, Christians, right? But we're known in the world as maybe something different. Our battle is, who are you going to be true and loyal to? The God of this world or Jesus Christ? And so we see similar pictures here. Now, sometimes we get this idea that Esther is living. This is like the original story of Cinderella. The poor girl becomes queen. And often you think that way, but it's really the opposite. And we wanted to kind of just develop that theme here. She's born in captivity, isn't she? Because she's a young girl, and they've been there 70 years right now, going on 70. And so she's been born in captivity in a foreign land, in a foreign language. She becomes an orphan. We don't know what happens to her family, her parents, but there's really two strikes right there. Can you imagine being an orphan and without parents, not losing one but both? And then as well being captain, she's young and she's a virgin, of course. And of course, here you think, well, this is a blessing. She's beautiful form and face. She's really beautiful to look at. Now, actually, that's going to be her curse, as we're going to see, because of what's going to happen to her. And so this girl has a troubled life from very beginning, and it's a tough life. And I'm going to build on it, and you might not be convinced, but I'm going to show you that that's the case. And I think it's important because all of us have our stories, don't we? And sometimes we have tough lives, and we can either become victims, and I don't want to be cliches, or victors. We can let the life that we've been brought into and that's come upon us determine the outcome, or else we can be overcomers through Christ. And what's most amazing is what God will do through Esther in her troubles to bring about providential deliverance to all of Israel. And so I don't care what God has allowed to happen to you or us or even a church collectively. if we just continue to have confidence, he will use those things to bring out glory or victory in the end. He always can do that. He causes all things to work out for good for those that what? Love him and are seeking him, right? And so this girl, I just want you to see, she's got a tough life. And we think, again, it's a Cinderella story, just, it's so romantic. No, it's the opposite, total opposite of it. And that's what we'll develop as we go through here. So chapter 2, we saw that there's a search for the new queen. We're introduced to Mordecai and Esther. Now we're going to look at the last section of it. She finds favor with the eunuch who's in charge of this harem of women. And so much so that she gets special attention and actually selected as queen by the king. And then Mordecai ends up saving the king's life. And so all this could happen in chapter 2. Then we'll look at chapter 3. So let's read, okay? So we're in Esther chapter 2, verse 8. So it came about when the king, the command and the decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Now, this man would be a eunuch, right? And probably not born that way, but castrated by the king's order, okay? And now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him. So he quickly provided her with cosmetics and food and gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace and transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Esther did not make known her people or her kindred. What does that mean? She didn't let him know she's a Jew or a Hebrew, right? For Mordecai instructed her that she should not make them known. Every day, Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. So let's look at some of these things as we look at this idea. So when we see that these women are taken and brought to the Susa to become part of this harem. They're going through all the land and they're finding the most beautiful. Question, you think the young lady felt like, oh great, I'm selected, what a glory and honor? Or was she taken by force, ripped from her family without the parents' consent because the king so ordered it?
Yeah, the latter.
I mean, you have to think about this. This was not a willful thing. I mean, maybe some of them thought it was a great idea. But if you're a Hebrew girl and, here is a heathen king and you're going to be taken and become part of his harem, this is the worst thing that could happen in your life. And I'll explain more about why that is the case. Now, for some reason, verse 9, the young lady pleased Haggai and found favor with him. This reminds me so much of the Joseph story. It's the female version of Joseph's story. Because his only fault, his only problem is his dad loved him a lot. And loved him so much and that his brothers were jealous and sold him into slavery. And it went from bad to worse. Because remember, he was put in charge of Potiphar's household. And everything he did, good hand was upon him. But then, since he was a handsome man, Potiphar's wife accused him of rape when he wouldn't sleep with her. And so now he goes from being a slave to being a prisoner. All right? But in the end, when he's put in charge of all of Pharaoh, second to Pharaoh, of all the famine relief, we have that beautiful verse when his brothers stand before him and they're afraid now that they're going to lose their life. He says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. He sent me before you for your survival. Now, no one knew that until it's all played out. Now, we get the privilege of knowing what happens to Esther and what she does. So because I think, this is just a wonderful story. But does she know what's going to happen? Does Mordecai know what's going to happen? So let's just kind of put ourselves in her shoes and his shoes. This is the worst thing that could ever happen when you're taken as a young girl who's a virgin, ripped from your family into the king's court. Now, we'll talk more about that harem in just a second. Yes.
Both stories of Joseph and then also with Esther are so powerful in themselves because we read it, we're amazed.
Right.
But with that amazement comes, with Joseph, there was many tests that God allowed
Right.
him to go through. Esther's going to go through those many tests as well. And the end result is if you remain faithful to God, then he will deliver.
That's right.
In both cases.
Yeah. So my question is, and you already know the answer, is this good thing that's happened to her or a bad thing? And you know where I'm leaning. It's not a good thing, but when you first read it at first blood, oh, this is wonderful, what a story. No, this is terrible. Yes, Clinton.
But when Joseph sent to get his father's kinfolk, he said that he had become a father to Pharaoh.
That's right. Yeah,
So he was more powerful except on the throne.
that's right. Yeah. So enough about Joseph. Let's move on to Esther. No, that's good. So now this is interesting. Why did she not make her nationality, her faith, her Hebrew lineage known? Is that a good question? Well, he told her. So the question is, why did he tell her?
Because there wasn't favor about the Jews.
Huh? Well, they're captives, but was Daniel a Jew? Yeah, but he was right up in the king's court. It's not they were all hated and put in jail and killed. And so there's a lot of questions of why, and it's easy, well, just to protect her identity so she's not persecuted. Well, that's not necessarily the case. The answer is we don't know why Mordecai says so. We don't know why.
He probably had uncertainty with how the king would respond to her.
Maybe.
Could have been her parents linked to her.
Could have been what?
Could have been her parents linking to her if her actual heritage was found out.
Yeah, maybe it's, we just don't know. And it's very curious, but I do know this. That Jesus said, if you don't confess to me before men, I'm not going to confess you before my Father. And as much as she's willing to keep it secret now, according to her cousin, Mordecai's advice, it's going to come a time she has to decide, am I going to expose myself as a Hebrew and face death or not? And with all of us, that's going to be our choice. There will come in your life, God will put you in a situation. You cannot keep your Christianity secret anymore. Either you're going to confess him and confront whatever's going around you, and you'll be exposed, or else you will fall away.
It could have been the will of God too, because if for her to keep quiet, because otherwise she may have not been chosen, and
We don't, it could be, but everything we say, and it could be if we don't know. We don't know. But I do know in the big picture, she's going to have to come a point that she's wrestling with it, like, what do I do? But to save her people, she has to acknowledge into the king that I am a Hebrew. And that's true with all of us. You could hide it as long as you dare, but there's going to come a point either you face up or you fall away. Yes.
The other thing too is that Mordecai, as you said, was going back and forth to see how Esther is doing.
Yeah.
At the same time, he's hearing the comments of the people there, and the Jews were probably not looked highly upon at all. They were considered captives, and he's hearing things that this is probably not a good thing for you to mention that you are a Hebrew, because it's going to mess up everything.
And I appreciate what you're saying. It could be, but everything you said could have been. So we don't talk about with any kind of assurance.
Mordecai did not want her to reveal it, and he's going
For some reason. Now, the fact that he's walking in front of the court, he must have some kind of position in favor with the king, or else you couldn't be that close. That's what some commentators said. That he is close enough to know what's going out. He's back in front of the court of the harem, all right? And so that's not, every peasant's not going to be able to do that. Now, notice verse 12. When the turn of each lady came to go into the king Ahasuerus, after the end of her 12 months, under the regulations for the women, for the days of their beautification were completed as follows: 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with spices and the cosmetics for the women, for women. The young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given to her. It was like just anything you want, you can take it in with her in front of the harem to the king's palace. Notice this beautification plan, 1 year. And people said it's just way over the top. There's no need for this. It's just, but 6 months with this oil and myrrh. Some people, I've read different things about it. It's to get rid of the stench, maybe your hard skin because you've been out in the sun all this. And then the 6 month with spices and cosmetics. But this is an intense beauty program. You with me? And it's all for the ego and lust of the king. All right? And so when you look at that, the young lady goes into the king. Now, we're going to comment about that here. In the evening, she would go in the morning, she returned to the second harem. Whoa, 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 whoa. She goes back to where she came from? Is she going back to her family? In the evening, she would go in the morning, she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shazgaz, that's the king's eunuch, so it's not the first one, who was in charge of the concubine. She would not go into the king unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Now let's say there's 100 virgins. Only one's going to be picked. Every other one will be a kept woman. Never allowed to marry, never allowed to bear children, will never have a husband, and she will never be called, in the rare exception that the king, finds her attractive and wants her to come. Now we're going to find that Esther, when she hears about this plot to kill her people, she's fearful about going for the king because he hadn't summoned her for, what did it say, 30 days? So it's not like even the queen is being called out. These ladies are just kept women. And what's the prospect of real happiness in their life? Yeah, they got to live in the king's court until the king got rid of them. But no marriage, no family. It's a miserable, kept life. And that's the prospect of Esther, as well as all the other young ladies. So we see what happens. And when we would, if not accepted again, let's rehearse it. She's no longer a virgin. Right? And you say, well, really? Because in the evening she goes in the morning she comes out. This is a one-night stand. Let's just be polite about it, and that's all I'll say. But you can fill in the blanks, right? I mean, yeah, the king's testing her for beauty, but it's way beyond that. It's a physical test, isn't it? She's no longer a virgin. She doesn't go home. She's placed in the harem. She'll never see the king again. She's never going to marry, have children of her own. So I ask again the question, is this good for Esther? Yeah. This is the worst thing could happen in your life. To be snatched up from your life that you know it and taken into this harem. Now verse 15. When the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, that's when we learn her father's name, even though he's dead, the uncle of Mordecai, who had come taken her his daughter, came into the king. She did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the woman, advised. Don't know what that was. And I don't even know what are they bringing in? Is it clothing? Is it drink? Who knows what it is? We're not told. And here we have this language again. We saw earlier with Haggai, the eunuch who is in charge of this whole process. Now Esther finds favor in all the eyes of who saw her. So Esther was taken to the king, to his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And what happens? We find that, as we said, this is not really a good thing. David Strain, a writer, said, the truth is, however, is that Esther has been manipulated and abused She's been emotionally and psychologically broken. Esther is a victim. You know, this 12 months of adjudication, can you imagine the pressure of what's going to happen if I'm not accepted, and what are the chances of that? All the pressure that you got to be perfect for the king. He goes on to say, we don't need to mend the text to clean it up. We don't need to scold Esther as though she were an ambitious modern starlet trying to sleep her way to a position of influence. Does that happen today? That's not what Esther's doing here. Rather, we need to read these words with grief and empathy, recognizing the story, a tale that has been told and continues to be repeated all over the world in every culture and every age, but it's not told correctly. This is a sad day, isn't it, for her? But the king loves Esther. Now, when you don't see God's invisible hand, you wouldn't know that he's behind this. But in Esther, we're seeing the working of we get to see his invisible hand working. Because the reason this all is written to show that God's in charge. And so just like when Joseph found favor, we find that the king loved Esther more than all the women. She found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins. So they set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. God is working behind the scenes. And you say, well, my life's just a mess. I've been stolen from my family. I'm part of a harem, and I'm going to lose my virginity, and I don't know if he's going to take me. But it all works out. Well, she becomes royalty. Now, do things happen by coincidence when God's involved? No. And so, again, some lessons. Even though God is our God and we have this great promise of heaven waiting for us of glory, he has never promised to protect us from the evils of the land we live in. Has he? No. He'll protect us. No one can snatch us out of his kingdom. But he will allow the evil of the land to sometimes afflict us. Just like they afflicted Jesus' son. There's always a purpose, though, behind it. He'll make it a purpose for good about it. So sometimes we cry out, why? Why? And that's fair. And there's so much injustice. God allows it, always allows it. He allowed it with Joseph, and he allows it now with Esther, and he allowed it with all his disciples. They were all martyred, every one of them, except John. So when you think, man, why is this going on? That's just the way things work. But maybe it's our testing ground, right? Of who we're going to trust, government, or we're going to trust God? Man, money, or God? And he will allow it to happen. And here we think, well, finally it's good for her. Well, not necessarily, because it's going to get even more sketchy.
Isn't it fair to say the closer you come to Christ, you experience that kind of suffering?
I would think so.
Yeah, it's like if you want to be as close as you can, you gotta almost expect it.
Because the God of this world, Satan, he's like, that guy's too powerful for the Lord. And he'll put more pressure on you to try to take you out. Doesn't that make sense? And so this story of Esther is so encouraging to all of us. Just stay faithful. Don't whine. Don't complain. It's going to happen. You know it. Jesus said, you're going to be hated by all men. He says that, right? You're going to be what? Hated. And if you're not hated, it's probably because we're not following Christ like we should. And the people just laugh at us, think we're a bunch of idiots. Yes, and then there.
I have to remember Paul, because when he wanted that thorn in the flesh removed,
Yeah.
that was his response. Well, how did Jesus respond to Paul?
Yeah.
My grace is sufficient for
Right.
you, because his grace will be there for us when we need it, and he knows that we need it. He'll be there.
That's right.
Doesn't mean that you're not going to go through a lot of
Problems.
problems,
Yeah.
but he'll be there. You
Yeah.
just got to keep
His power is perfected in our weakness. Yes. Yes.
Getting all these fine things from the king.
Well,
Praise her.
yeah.
God don't want her to do what she's doing. He wants her to follow him.
Yes.
He doesn't want her to be
Well, right. I know it sounds like, But she's not that whore, using your word. She's now his wife and queen. But the process is not admirable, all right? But she really has no choice in the matter. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it is pathetic, isn't it? It's ugly, the whole thing. But these people, they were just not very morally good people, like we see today. So the king gives her a banquet. There's a lot of banquets in this whole account, all the way through the end. And I'm going to give you an outline in probably about chapter 8. Remember acrostic, a structure of a book? You remember that. You were impressed with it. You'll be amazed the pattern that we're going to see in the book of Esther. Everything that happens, it reverses itself to the glory of God and to things work out. It all gets bad and there's a climax and it reverses and undoes everything from the first half of the book. It makes it right in the second half. And I'll show you that later, all right? But here's this banquet. For all the prince's servants, he made a holiday for the provinces. Some suggested a holiday for the provinces. They probably didn't have to be taxes. But it's just a day of celebration because the king has a new queen. And they gave gifts according to the king's bounty. But then it says when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her kindred or her people, even as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her she had done, went under his care. Second time this is repeated. Isn't that interesting? It's just, again, there's a secret here. But you're not going to be able to keep it forever, Esther. You're going to have to confront your lineage when you talk to the king to try to save them. So then we have this interesting paragraph. We don't know a lot about it, but it says, in those days, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, and Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials, from those who guarded the door, became angry, and they sought to lay hands on the king. They're going to kill him. This is a conspiracy to assassinate the king. The plot became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther. So he overhears it, or he hears someone talking about it. We don't know. But he gets hold of his cousin, says, you got to tell the king. And she informed the king in Mordecai's name, gave him credit for it, right? And now when the plot was investigated and found out to be so, they were both hanged on the gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. Now we have in our Bible 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And it's the Chronicles of the Kings, right? 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. This is not the Chronicles we have. Kings would have their own chronicles, and they would write their history down of what happened in their kingdom during their reign. Later, it's important, when King Xerxes can't sleep, he has the chronicles brought to him, and he starts having them read to him about what's happened in his kingdom. And he's going to read about this event. So just stay tuned for that. I don't want to spoil it. That'd be a spoiler alert, right? Now, the question is, why isn't Mordecai rewarded here? And you say, well, why should he be? Well, because it's been written, this is a historian, Herodotus. In one instance, he says King Xerxes rewarded 2 ship captains who aided him in battle against the Greek by giving them land and added their names to the king's benefactors list. In another event, a man named, you can read it, Zenagaros, was appointed governor of Sicily after saving the life of Xerxes' brother. What did Mordecai just do? Save the life of king. He should have been made king of some province or something. But he's totally overlooked. And that's important to this story. Now, we're going to revisit it later. But you just need to mark it down like, there's an injustice here. It's not because he doesn't like Mordecai, but something happened he's overlooked.
He didn't know it.
What do you mean?
I don't think he knew it.
Oh, no, the king knew it because Esther told him there's a plot, and she said, Mordecai told me. He's the one who revealed it. She gave credit. Yeah, so the king knows, but something happened. He's not rewarded, and that's important. Hang on to this. Everything's building to a climax, all right? So Keep reading. All right. I just want you to read this. Blessed be the God and Father, Lord Jesus Christ, Father of mercy, God of our comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction. So we will be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For just as the suffering of Christ are ours in abundance, so also is our comfort abundant through Christ. Isn't that beautiful? And God's taken care of Esther and all her affliction. It doesn't mean the suffering isn't over. Actually, it's going to get worse. So, chapter 3. You ready? Okay. So we got 15 minutes. I'm not going long. We're going to get this guy named Haman introduced, and he's going to be promoted instead of Mordecai. The contrast, which is interesting. Mordecai is going to refuse to comply to honor Haman, and so there's going to come out of this a plot to destroy all the Jews. And that's when an edict is going to be sent out to kill every Jew out and purge them from the land. So let's read about it, all right? So we're in chapter 3. After these events, see, that's kind of a common statement, right? King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. And the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, because the king has exalted him. For so the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Verse 3, then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why are you transgressing the king's command? Because he's telling everyone to pay homage to Haman, because he made it so. Now it was when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage, my Bible says, but he disdained to lay holds on Mordecai alone, for they told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore Haman sought to destroy, what does your Bible say? All the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So that means, remember how big his kingdom was? All the way up to Greece, down to Egypt, all the way to the east. He's going to plot to have every Jew wiped out. No Jesus Christ, if that happens, right? All right? So what's going on? So let's read this and go through it. This guy is an evil, wicked man. He's an Agagite. You say, well, who is that? So when we think about this history of this, he's a descendant of Agag, and he was a king of the Amalekites. And we read in Exodus that they were going to be a thorn in the Jews' flesh forever. They're going to have war against from generation to generation because they didn't totally destroy them. And so they hated the Jews, and the Jews were always fighting the Amalekites. And he is a descendant of them, an Agagite, you know, in reference to the king. All right? Yes. Okay, we're coming up to that. Good question. Why didn't Mordecai? All right? So here it says he refused to bow down. And the question is, we're going to ask why, right? Now, I asked the question, why did he tell Esther not to tell anyone he was a Jew? And the answer was what? No. All right. Now, why might you say here that he refuses to? We don't have a lot of time, but any ideas? Oh, you're all gun shy now, because last time I shut you down.
His nationality, who he was, and the history, he knew that.
All right.
He knew that there would be a problem with him in his position of authority.
Is there anything inherently wrong with bowing down in front of someone? Think about that, because I'll ask, look at this. Abraham bowed before the Hittites. Jacob bowed before Joseph. Moses bowed before Jethro. David bowed before Saul. Nathan bowed before David. It showed honor and respect to authority, as long as you don't what? Worship. So it's not bad. It's more what David's saying. Agag was, Someone suggested this. I want to show you this. He's called the enemy of the Jews. Huey says, no respecting Benjamite would bow down before an Amalekite. All right? Do you remember the Miracle on Ice? 1980. We're all old enough here. Heather wasn't born yet. Sorry. She's the only one that doesn't know. But the Soviet Union was our arch enemies in the Cold War. They had won 4 Olympic gold medals in hockey. U.S. hockey was never any good. This was not even the Olympic final. It wasn't for the gold medal. It was a preliminary round. But in 1980, USA, in Placid, New York, they beat the Soviets 4-3. I remember watching it. And it's like, wow, everyone was just celebrating. Why was this a big deal? Because everything the Soviet Union represented and everything we represented, this was like a final victory over them, even though they still exist. That's Haman and Mordecai. They have a history. These are our worst enemies that have always been a thorn in our side. And the last thing I'm going to do is going to bow down before you and give you any respect because you've been the nemesis to the Israelites for all this time. Now that's courageous too, because he's defying who? The King Xerxes, right? But this was the emotion and the history behind it, just like this Miracle on Ice. And that was the biggest day if you ever watched that, right? So he's filled with rage, and he doesn't want to just kill Mordecai, and it shows this history coming through. He wants to destroy every last Jew. He is a descendant emotionally and culturally of the Amalekites. You could tell in his attitude here. And so we find in the first month, verse 7, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King, that is the lot, was cast before Haman from the day to day and from month to month until the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And they say, what does that verse mean? We have to understand is a Persian word for the lot. When you cast lots, what are you doing? Okay, you're letting the gods determine your decision. So they might be like throwing dice or something like that. Remember when they're picking Matthias to replace Judas? What did they do? They cast lots. And they said, God, you're the heart knower. And they said, whatever you pick, we'll go with. Well, that's what they're doing. They're casting lots. And the word pur is very important as a Persian word for what? A lot. It says that, right? In the 12th year, that is the lot, was cast. This is very important because there's going to be a feast we're going to learn about that Jews celebrate to this day, and it comes from this word Purim. Okay, just remember that. Everything's building. Okay? So they cast it and they said, okay, the day we're going to destroy them, it'll be in December. It's going to be a year, 12 months later. And so what happens, we find that he goes to the king. He said, King, we got these people. And he just weaves truth with lies. And they're scattered among all your provinces. And they don't observe your laws. Is that true? No, they're paying taxes. They're being good citizens. Because you can be good citizens in an evil country, but still be faithful to God, right? Amen. All right? But it's not in the king's interest to let them remain. Now, did he tell them how big these people were? How many? No. He makes it probably sound like it's just a few thousand or whatever, and they're just a pain in your side. So you make an edict and make a decree that they should be destroyed. And I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry the king's business and put it in the treasury. In other words, when we go around and kill these people, we'll collect their wealth and we'll put it in the king's treasury and you'll get rich, rich, rich. Isn't this evil? Yes. All right. Man, that's what happens today. Things like that, plans. And so the king took his signet ring from his hand, gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And he said, the silver is yours. You keep it. I don't need it. In other words, that'll be your payment for, protecting my kingdom. And the people also do with them as you please. Now, who are the people going to be? The Jews. Does the king know that? Does he know his wife is a Jew? It couldn't get any worse. Could it get any worse? That's how Satan does. He works around here. And so the king's scribes were summoned on 13th day, and it was written that Haman commanded the king's satraps to go all the provinces. And they wrote it in every language. That'd be Egyptian and Hebrew and Greek and everything. And they send people and dispatch them, and they seal with the king's ring. Now, you have this decree. They would have a ring, and they would put wax on it, and they would put his ring on the wax that was melted, and everyone can see, oh, that's the king's seal. It's a notary. That's right. This is an official document. And so the day is set, 12 months ahead, everyone's going to be killed. And so when we think about this, the letter was sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, destroy, to kill, and annihilate all the Jews. Satan comes to what? John chapter 10. Jesus is a good shepherd, but Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Boy, this is Satan working is what it is through this man. Annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and the seize of possessions and plunder. So they're going to take this letter, and it's going all over the continents. This is a massive extermination. And there's one lady who can stop it. And who put her in that position? I don't care how troubled and terrible life she's had, God has allowed it to happen so he can use her to save his people. And if she doesn't respond accordingly, there's no Jesus Christ, because the lineage of Abraham will be wiped out and there will be no Jesus. But God's in charge, isn't he? And think about, man, what does he put me on this earth for? Jesus said that, blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and then revile you and spurn your name as evil and count as Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy. Why? Because that's the day God's going to use you. And it means that you're really following him. Because your reward's great in heaven. And they did it to the prophets. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable. Are we living among the Gentiles? Yeah, we're living among a godless world. It's amazing how things maybe have turned for a while, especially when we're talking about make America pray again. That's just crazy. So that when they speak against you as evildoers, when they see your good deeds, they're going to glorify God. We can be the only shining light they ever have a chance to see. Indeed, all desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus, Paul says, will be persecuted. You can mark better. Well, evil people, imposters, will go from bad to worse. Do we see that? Deceiving, they're always lying to us and being deceived themselves. They're the most deceived people in the world. One more and we'll be done. Don't be deceived, brothers. John says that the world hates you. Don't be shocked. Mary. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Before the Passover. Yeah, probably. But if they were casting lots, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll look into that.
But the decree went out to all the nations.
All the nations.
But there was no way for them to escape. I was just thinking, is that one country? Why didn't they?
No, yeah, they can't go anywhere because everyone's going to be killing. So be ready for this day. The couriers went out impelled by the king's command while the decree was issued at the citadel in Susa. While the king and Haman sat down to drink, the city of Susa was in what? Confusion. It's chaos. Like, oh no, this is going to be a dark day. Because these people run businesses, they're their neighbors. A lot of them were honorables. A lot of them were in a government like Daniel was. And they're all going to be eradicated. They're going, what? And so the question is, what happens next? And the answer is what?